Welcome, everybody. So today I am in Toronto, so I'm grateful to be talking to you from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And Toronto, where I am, is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And acknowledging the treaties and territories is a reminder of the privileges and benefits we enjoy as the citizens of Ontario, which are rooted in the longstanding treaties and historical relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And as a company, we're committed to ongoing reconciliation through a really, I don't know, it's been a very impactful partnership with a not-for-profit charity called Inspire. And we launched it in 2022 with a goal to fund 5 bursaries over 25 years. And then those of you who know me well know that I can't leave well enough alone. And I think when our team, really heard about the 215 students that were found buried at the Kamloops Residential School, it was really kind of a rallying cry. And I think it got us thinking about how could we even think bigger beyond the bursary program that we committed to. So we've launched a program called Impact 215, and in fact, it's spreading. We've got now 3 other consultancies that have joined us to do this, and our goal is a big, hairy, audacious goal. Thank you, Jim Collins. And it's to fund 215 students, whether through the bursary program or through continuing training opportunities that Inspire provides. And so as a member of our community, you can help with this, and it's very easy to get involved. You can let other people know about the work we do, because everything we do that we receive through referral, we send a portion to. You can donate directly to Inspire or talk to your company's sponsorship about Inspire, either through us or directly. They do just fantastic work. And I think we might have some coaches on this call today. So if you're a coach and you'd like to join the consortium that we've started, we're partnering right now with Parachute Executive Coaching, 3COs, and the Indigenous Training Corporation. We'd love to add to that group, because that's going to help us get to that 215 faster. So you can find about more about this initiative on our website. We're tracking how many students we've funded so far. I think we're up to 7 or 8. So we've still got a ways to go, but we're really thrilled with the momentum that we're starting to get around it. So thank you to those of you who've supported us so far, and it's a great opportunity to make an impact. So let's talk about what we're here to talk about today. So heroic leadership, stop trying to go it alone. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. At the Roundtable, we're always looking at the evolving practice of leadership. Leadership is a practice. It's not a destination. And I think we constantly have to look to say what is relevant today. It's very easy to get stuck in old models and old mental models around how we need to show up as leaders and what leadership needs to quote unquote be. So if you're looking for ways to kind of expand your own leadership, you're looking for maybe some new things to put into your own toolkit, this is what we're going to do today. So I am going to start with a little bit of a temperature check poll. So Kenzie, if I can get you to queue up the first poll, which is when you finish the statement, the last 3 years in leadership have been from a scale of 1 to 10, not challenging, like less challenging than usual, to relentlessly challenging. What would you say? So Kenzie, if you can launch that. So pick a number, any number. Whatever you feel, you're feeling like it's less challenging, somewhat challenging, oh my goodness, challenging. You bought my book, did I really sign up for this challenging? All right, let's get a couple more people in, see how it's going. Oh, there's some people, oh, I'm surprised. Interesting poll results. Give it a couple more seconds. If you haven't got your vote in, we're going to close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we'll end that poll. And as we can see, Mostly we're in the somewhat challenging to relentlessly challenging bucket. 6 is 7, so it looks like about, a good, I'm not really great at math, but looks like a good 80%. Maybe it's the 80-20 rule, or from somewhat challenging to relentlessly challenging. And that, if you're feeling that way, if you're at that higher end of the scale, I would say, depending on the industry you've been in, depending on the things that you've been doing, it doesn't surprise me. I think we from 2020 through to today, feel like we're coming out a little bit light at the end of the tunnel, but there's so much that's on the go, and that I think as leaders we've been dealing with over the last little bit. So I thought it was interesting. I was looking at words. I'm kind of a word nerd. And so for those of you who may be feeling like you're closer to the 7, 8, 9, 10 on this scale, you're not alone, and you should know that in 2022, the Collins Dictionary chose their word of the year. And I don't know if you know what it was, but I'm going to share with you. It was permacrisis, which I thought was like kind of hilarious and yet not hilarious at the same time. So we've got change coming at it, bombarding us all the time, whether it's global uncertainty, it's talent shortages, it's labor unrest, or it's Chat GPT. I don't know if you're worried about your job in Chat GPT. It's becoming increasingly challenging, I think, for leaders to do the things that we're hired to do, which is to drive performance while at the same time keeping our teams happy and engaged. And I think with more and more of the headlines, like I feel like I can't scroll through LinkedIn without seeing something about, whether it's shortages or open positions, so many posts for open positions, clients that I'm talking to that are really struggling to find the talent they need. And then when I work with the executive teams and leaders that I'm working with, I do feel like there's this pressure cooker that's being created, and where a lot of people feel like they're kind of holding on by their fingertips to leadership. And I think there's a real reason for that. And that's what we're going to explore today. We're going to look at the fundamental shift that I think we need to start to take when it comes to the role of leaders and the practice of leadership. And it's to look at the two directions we can go down. We can continue down the path that we've been on, which is this heroic model of leadership, or we can start to move down another path, which is towards a more collective approach to leadership. And so we're going to unpack it. I'm going to leave it to you to decide which journey you want to take. But let's make this as interactive as possible. Feel free to throw questions in the chat as we go along. I'm going to ask Leah to maybe keep her eye on what's coming in and the questions that are coming up. I will attempt to pause. Sometimes I get on a roll and I get going. And but if you want to kind of chime in with something, I think Kenzie has the ability. Well, I know Kenzie has the ability to unmute you and bring you into the conversation. So feel free to do that. And we'll see where the conversation takes us today. This is a chance for us to play with ideas and to unpack some things about leadership. So as we get started, it would be great to know who's here and what lens you're looking at this from. So if I can have, it's actually poll number 2. I forgot to change my slides. I added that other poll. Next poll, Kenzie, is who's with us today? So are you an L&D and talent internally? Are you an external trainer or coach, or are you an internal executive or leader? Let's get a sense of who's here, and then I can just skew my comments accordingly, or appropriately, I should say. Okay, great. So it looks the majority of folks on the call are internal leaders. That's terrific, because that is how this session is skewed. Those of you that are external or in other positions, don't worry, I will tap it in. And I would love all of you to sort of pepper in with your own experience as well. So that's who's in the mix with us today. So let's get going. These polls, oops. How do I stop sharing? Is the poll still sharing? Can somebody tell me? Leah?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. I'm like, it looks like it's still sharing to me, but anyway, okay, this is my screen. Okay, so let's first talk a little bit about leadership and the context within which we sort of usually come at leadership from when we're looking to develop. And, I've been in this space now for, I don't know, I'm getting old, 25 plus years. And often, when we start this conversation, we're usually, thinking, okay, I need some leadership training, I need some coaching. And but really what's going on underneath that, like that's to me, it's like the tip of the iceberg. Leadership training, leadership coaching, that's the piece that we start with. It's the easy go-to. But really, what are we saying as leaders when we're asking for that, or when we're an internal, L&D professional or external coach? What's really going on? Well, I think what we're actually saying is, you know, on an individual level, we're trying to become better. We're trying to build our leadership so that we can really unleash the best out of ourselves and the best out of other people, right? The people on our team. We're also trying to build better teams. We need, there's this push for exceptional performance for teams. So we're usually trying to do something like that, or we're trying to really support a culture where people want to come to work and are positive about the organization that they work with. These are usually the three things that we're trying to do in some way, shape, or form. And what that involves is not training and knowledge. It's not knowledge and skills. Well, partly skills. It's a lot of it is understanding your mindset. It's understanding your motivation. It's understanding your behavior. We need to get below the surface in leadership to really be able to start to make a bigger impact. But here's the thing, none of that is enough, right? It's really not enough. And I think you can do all the work yourself. And my analogy would be, I used to live in Ottawa. And so the federal government was probably our biggest employer. And I had a lot of friends that used to join the federal government and get sent on French language training. And they would spend 6 months of intensive training to learn how to speak French. And then they would go back to their organization. And 6 months later, they probably had retained some of their skills, but not a lot. And the reason being was that they were seen as the Anglophone, so people spoke to them in English, conversed in English, and so they eventually started to erode their skills. It takes a collective impact to sustain. We need to be in it together. We can't just be building our own little special team and having a nice little culture and us being the hero that is getting the results, in the organization. Our belief, and very strongly for the last 16 years we've been doing this, is really to help strategic, committed leaders and organizations start to really move to collective impact. And that's what we've done as a firm, is to really put all of our energy into this idea of how do we start to break down the siloing of leadership. And so today we're going to talk about, how can you do some of that on your own? How can you do it with your teams? And why is it so important right now? So this is the journey. We're going to start by looking at the expectations on leaders that we have, why heroic leadership poses actually a very big challenge and risk to our organizations, and then what can we do to cultivate collective leadership? So what is it? And what does that even mean? I'm sure a lot of you are like, Glenn, I don't even know what that means. Don't worry, we're going to get to it. So let's talk about the origins of leadership development, right? And I'm going to travel back in time. We're going to go back in time to a gentler, less female-friendly time in organizations. Any of you fans of Mad Men would recognize this picture. Early 60s, right? This is what was going on when, the Don Drapers of this world were showing up at work. I mean, managers got promoted from within. That was the pathway. It was a very homogeneous group, mostly white male, face it. Manager had no direct line responsibilities. Their job was simply to manage. It was very hierarchical. And so the skills that you needed were to basically provide feedback and communicate well. That was about it, right? Let people know what they need to be doing and then give them feedback if they were or weren't doing it. Towards the end of the 60s, we started seeing a little bit of a flattening in organizations, and we started seeing managers start to have a few more individual contributor responsibilities. Okay, so that's stage one. Then we move into the 70s. In the 70s, so you still need to do all these things, but now we start having the conversation about developing direct reports, right? So now we're putting a little bit more of a focus on making sure that our direct reports are being developed. We start talking about efficiency. We start talking about needing to manage change and change more in the process of change to get to that efficiency. We start talking about doing more with less. We've got to start to up productivity. And this is where, especially towards the late 70s, we start seeing even more of a hollowing out of middle management. And by the way, please stop yelling. I need you to be a little bit more sensitive. You can't just scream at your direct reports to get the stuff done. And then innovation more related to process improvement starts coming through. So as a manager, you've got to be able to be good at that. In the 80s, and so into the late 80s, into the early 90s, we start really pushing now toward, this is when the hollowing out really starts. This is when I entered the workforce, was the late 80s, and there was just pink slip central. So many middle managers were getting pink slipped. And we were wanting leaders to start to deliver more results because we were losing people. And I remember all the courses that used to be really in vogue in the late 80s, early 90s. Some of you might remember these, like it was all the, get more done with less. And, it was all this sort of idea that time management was going to just make your life so much easier. And then we started getting into some global reach. The internet starts coming in, and now suddenly we have to handle a bit more complexity because we're starting to go global. And to do that, you better start thinking strategically. This is when we start really seeing the differentiating language between manager and leader really starts to emerge at this stage now. And it's almost like we create this hierarchical leaderships up here, and who's managing stuff anymore, because managing almost became a bit of a dirty word at that point. And as a result, we need to start looking at coaching, right? We need to be coaching our people. We need to have more individual contributor responsibilities, by the way, because you're not doing enough. And as you're kind of getting more global and you're having to represent, you've got to bring that executive presence, need a bit more gravitas in your role. So I remember, again, this is the big presentation skills. All of those kinds of courses really start having their heyday during this time period. So enter into the millennium, right? And coming into the 2000s and further on, we're more aware, we're more, I hate the word woke. But if we started the early part of this, the big conversation before we even had the pandemic was VUCA. The fact that we're in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. That word comes from the US military, VUCA, Cold War. That's the language. It's funny that we use that in the workplace, right? But this is what's happening. So as leaders, we need to be able to manage all of that. We need to be, as a result, be more agile. Boy, you better be able to pivot. If you're one of those very process-oriented people, you're in trouble, because we're going to have to pivot on a dime. And by the way, you need to be resilient and also make your teams resilient. Let's make sure everybody's resilient, and got to be aware of mental health, because they go hand in hand. Saw a lot of that work happen over the last 3 years. Mental health resilience on the agenda, it's on the table. We're expecting managers to be able to spot the signs, know what to do, and oh, by the way, be digitally savvy at the same time, and make sure that you're being diverse and including everybody. And now we've got to be trauma informed too as leaders. It's a lot, right? I don't know about you, but it kind of gets exhausting when you think about all of the things that we have been putting on leaders over the decades, and continuing to flatten and flatten and flatten organizations where leaders are often doing a full-time job and coaching from the side of their desk, managing from the side of their desk, going back to what it used to be to where it is now. It's a world, a sea of change. And yet we haven't really changed how we think about it, right? So I've got another poll for you. How many of you, or this is a statement actually, it's a true or false statement. So statement is, many of you or the leaders you work with feel overwhelmed on a regular basis. True or false? Or you could pick, depends on the week. But I really want you to think about it. Like, most of the time when you're talking to colleagues, like, are people talking about being busy, being tired, working weekends, like, what is going on with the leaders, either that you work with if you're an external coach, if you're supporting if you're internal talent, or if you're a leader yourself? How are you feeling? Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so we'll end the poll. I'll share the results. So 92% feel overwhelmed on a regular basis. Leaders that they're either working with or that they're feeling themselves. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I feel it too. I feel it too. It's not easy. This is not easy work. And and I think this is why, we've really got to look at this heroic leadership model that we've all been conditioned to believe in. And this little image, like, I don't know, I pulled this image. I have seen this image on more consultants' websites that talk about leadership development. I've seen it in more PowerPoint presentations. I probably used it. Not going to lie, right? This idea of we can do it all. And we're told, don't let them see you sweat. We're told, you can't be vulnerable with your team. We're given all these messages. It's lonely at the top, right? Just accept the fact it's lonely at the top. You're going to be lonely as a leader. And I think, these are some of the things that we have to really start to challenge, and we have to start to bust the myth that as leaders, we can be everything to everybody. Leadership is it's like the seasons. We as individuals are continuously evolving, but the really tricky part about leadership, like the really hard part about leadership, is that expectations on you as a leader are constantly evolving, constantly evolving. Through the research that our partner Management Research Group has done over decades of researching leaders, you can get overwhelmed by it. You can go into their research and you will see that factors like the industry you work in, different set of expectations if you're in manufacturing versus a professional services firm, the level you're at, different expectations if you're an SVP versus an entry-level supervisor, your age, the function you lead, where you work globally, all of these things make a difference. And I think as leaders, it can get really overwhelming. It's like, what should I pay attention to? And by the way, I've got to do all those other things. The other part that's really challenging, and I want us all to tune in on this, because this is something that when I heard this research, I thought, this now explains so many things to me about the people I've worked with over the years, the coaching I've done. And it's neuroscience. This is grounded in neuroscience. So there's lots of ways you can slice and dice a brain, but we're going to slice it this way. This is from Matthew Lieberman and his book, Social. I'll show you a book cover in a second, so you can go and buy the book because it's great. But what Matthew Lieberman talks about is the two sides of our brain. The non-social side, that's where we do complex thinking. We have learning, agility, and speed, broad knowledge, prefrontal cortex stuff happening here, right? And that part of our brain works really hard and it gets tired very easily, right? The other side of our brain is the social side of our brain. That is the place of where we have self-awareness, where behaviors like collaboration and communication, authenticity, trust, all those people, relational side of the brain. The more emotional side of our brain is that side. And what Lieberman found through his research was that it's not like we hold both of those things equally. What tends to happen is we have what he called or termed a neural seesaw, where when we put a focus in one area, so if we're focusing in social, the result side, the non-social side of our brain tends to quiet off. And when we go the other way, it goes the other way. It's very hard to kind of, if you think of a teeter-totter, it's hard to balance a teeter-totter. You're usually up or down, and depending on the weight that's on the other end, you're going to go more one way or the other. Some of us have a lot of weight around results. Others of us have a lot of weight around people, right? So Matthew, in what he commissioned was work with Management Research Group, our partner, to look at how many leaders effectively balance both. How many leaders are good at balancing both the results side and the social side? Let's see. And so what MRG did was they did a global research study. It was mostly, I would call them, westernized countries. So US, Canada, Australia, and the UK. was the pool of leaders that they looked at. And what they did was they went through their data, their database, and what MRG measures. I think some of you on this call have probably been through MRG's Leadership Effectiveness Analysis 360. But for those of you who haven't, just to give you a very quick overview, what the LEA measures is it measures 22 leadership behaviors that are grouped into 6 core functions of leadership. So you got to be able to create a vision, get followership behind that vision, implement it, follow through, achieving results in team play. You can see the little 22 behaviors grouped underneath them on that left side. And it also measures, though, 26 effectiveness measures. So your behavior is one thing, how effective you are with those behaviors is another. So that's what it looks at. And so that's what they did, was they went through those 60 some odd thousand folks, and they said, okay, of the best leaders, of the most effective leaders, how many ranked in the top third of being able to balance both relationships and results? Because what they found was there's actually a benefit if you can do both, right? You get increased impact, increased organizational benefits, all kinds of things that are critical for the business, for you as a leader, if you're able to balance both. So this is gonna be interactive. So in the chat, I'd like you to guess, and some of you may already know this stat, but what percentage do you think ranked in the top third for both relationships as results out of that group of leaders? Was it 10%, 30%, 20%? What do you think? So let's see some guesses here. So 10%, 15%. Those are good guesses. Oh, Zev's like 93%. You are, Zev, I love your optimism. 18%, 33%, 20%, 8%. Karen's getting closer. Any other guesses? Dun, dun, dun. Going once, going twice. You're going to hate this number. All right, here it is. Top third. Less than 1%. Let that sink in for a minute. Less than 1%. Less than 1% of us are in the top third when it comes to balancing people and results from this global study. That's pretty shocking. So MRG said, okay, wait. Maybe we shouldn't look at the top third. Maybe we should look at the top 50%. Let's look at the top half and see if it gets any better. Got a bit better. 5.6%. Didn't get that much better, right? This is something we all really need to pay attention to as leaders, because it means that, I know we all think that we're great, right? We all think, oh, well, yeah, but I'm in that 1%. That's me. Statistically, you might not be, right? Like you might not be. So just know that and be aware of it. Like, so I think half of the battle in leadership is self-awareness and understanding that it's difficult. And when we, again, look at, what we're being asked to do, and I color-coded the things that kind of lean more to the relational side versus the results side, we're asking people to do a lot on both sides of the equation. And I know all of you, we could add so much more to this PowerPoint slide around what we're expecting from leaders, right? So my next poll question I want you to think about. Again, this is a true or false question, and this I'm only giving you true or false. For the organizations you work for or with, do they expect leaders to manage all these demands? True or false? Do you think in the organization you work for that, yeah, they expect me to be able to do all of this? Or no, you know what? That's false. They don't expect me to be able to do all of it. I get to just work with my strengths and do what I need to do, and I'm not expected to be trauma informed and digitally savvy and agile and good at feedback and doing all those things. I can do some of it well, but don't have to do all of it well. Okay, I think we're almost all in. I'll end the poll. All right, so we got some work to do. Yeah, 85% are feeling like, yeah, you know what? All that stuff, and probably a whole bunch of other things that I didn't capture, or probably on your performance review. Um, so let's talk about what we need to do a little bit differently, shall we? Okay. So here's the thing. This model of, you're the lone leader out there on the wire with all the followers following you is, in my opinion, going to be one of the quickest ways for you to burn out. Like when I talk to leaders who are burnout, or in the last year, I've seen more people step out of their careers than I've seen in the last 20 years, and not going to anything else. And these aren't leaders that you hope would step out. These are the leaders that you're going, oh my gosh, we just lost our top performer. And that's the real problem. And, at the Roundtable, we sort of specialize in those, ambitious, hard driving key performers. And the thing about those of you on the call, I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know about yourself, is you're marketable, you can go anywhere, you don't need this. And so I think what we have to really start to do is reorient, for ourselves, how do we need to think about leadership differently? And as organizations, how do we start to shift away from this idea that the only way forward is to build individual leaders who are capable of doing the work, because it's not sustainable. And I'm not seeing, and I think the downside for people who are um, ambitious and driven is like every strength becomes your liability. And we need a different model to help people, frankly, put boundaries around things. And I want to say no, because too many people take on too much work. So let's talk about how we can move in the direction of supporting collective leadership, both for ourselves, for our colleagues, for the organizations we work with. So there's three key chunks that we're going to talk through. And after each one, I want to kind of hear your ideas. Like, what are you doing? Or if you've got a question, throw in a question. But certainly, I think there's going to be some things that as I talk through this, not going to be like earth shattering, but it might be being put in a context that you hadn't thought about before. And I'd love to hear, like, what other things do you do to sort of grow this path? So we're going to look at three things: mindset, behavior, and community. And so let's talk about mindset first. So, we've talked this need to kind of shift this idea that leaders need to go it alone. So one of the things we do in our programs, most leadership programs do. If you're working with a coach, you're going to do this. Your organization probably has these kinds of things available to you, is that we'll say to leaders, hey, you got to improve your self-awareness. I really believe that. I believe you cannot be an effective leader unless you've got a really deep level of self-awareness. But here's the thing. Self-awareness is great, but it's not enough. It's not enough. We have to go deeper. We have to take this notion of self-awareness. Like, I understand myself. I understand that's important to me. And I think where a lot of leaders don't move to exceptional performance is that they tap out. They go, that's good enough. I know who I am. I know I'm a red, and I know that's how I impact you. And it's good, right? No, we have to make a commitment to starting to want to change those behaviors and change that approach. But we also need to think about now moving away from just ourselves and this, I feel I had one of my clients say to me once, I was so self-aware, I was self-indulgent. I thought that's a really interesting thing to say. The shift, I think, that we need to really be really doubling down on as leaders is, yes, know yourself, but how much effort are you putting into knowing your teammates? And how much effort are you putting into knowing the collective team and the makeup of your team and what that means to the business, to the wider organization? We're all part of a system, right? So this ability to start to think more broadly beyond yourself and maybe, individual interactions to that collective is pretty critical. So on the know thyself, There's a couple of suggestions that I have for here to start to really develop that muscle. So this is where I'd love to kind of hear what else you do. So if you're brand new to this and you're like, Glenn, I haven't even thought about like assessments, for sure start with some level 1 assessments. What's a level 1 assessment? Simple things, DISC, MBTI, any of the personality assessments out there. Those are good starter assessments. They help you understand the impact of your personality on other people, what your biases are around your approach. Great starter assessments. There's self-rater. Self-rater, you're putting in your own tapes when you're answering the questions. So, you got to kind of get a balanced view of them. But start with level 1 if you've never done any of this kind of work. Start there. Level 2 are where you start getting other people's feedback. So 360s, and I know 360s get a bad rap, and there are terrible 360s out there. Maybe your organization has a terrible 360. 360, in my opinion, should not be evaluative. It should be developmental. So look for a developmental 360 and use it as a tool. I'm always shocked when people take their 360 as something that's like this punitive measure. 360 allows you, a good 360 allows you to recalibrate. Where am I now? What's the situation I'm leading in now? If you've changed over your team, if you've got a new boss, if you've got a new situation you're dealing with, I redo my 360 every time I'm feeling like I need to recalibrate on my leadership. It's important to do that. You're not the same. Your business isn't the same. Your team isn't the same. It's a chance to snapshot that. So look at 360s as a tool, not a punitive event, because we have to start, getting used to the feedback and building that culture of feedback, which to me then is, you can do it in a simple way. If you're like, well, I don't want to do 360. My company can't afford a 360, it's not something that I feel ready for. Okay, well then there's a simple way you can start to do 360 feedback, which is getting very continuous and structured around what I would call feedback feed forward, right? What are 3 things that I do well as a leader? And what's one thing that if I did more of it, it would help the team? Ask those questions. Ask them on a regular, right? Think of it like 365 feedback, right? Every day looking to recalibrate how you're doing. If you do this within your team, you'll create a culture where you're normalizing development, you're normalizing your own development and encouraging people to then share theirs. This is moving us to more of a collective energy around supporting each other in development, but you have to lead the way as a leader, right? So those are my ideas. What do you do to get to know yourself a little bit better? What have you done over the course of your career that's been the most helpful? And if you've got a specific tool that you loved, let's share. Let's throw it in the chat. Did you do a 360? One of my other favorite assessments is the Kolbe Index. I'm also a big fan of the Enneagram, which for some people is a little woo-woo, but that was a big game-changing assessment tool for me to continue to go deeper. I just did the Berkman last week. I found out yet another reason why I drive my team crazy, which I will be sharing with them at our upcoming team meeting. So what else have you used or done? Oh, social styles. Yeah, that's another really good one. I like that tool a lot. It's a simple one. Social styles is a nice, simple one. And I think as we talk later, we're going to talk about how do you start to bring this into the groups that you're working with. Any other sort of tools that you would share? One of our other favorites at the Roundtable is a tool called the Individual Directions Inventory, IDI, which is a motivational assessment, which really helps you understand, why am I behaving the way I'm behaving? And why is it that I can't change this behavior? Okay, that's what it helped me understand. Oh yeah, DISC. Yeah, we use DISC too. I love it. Oh, CBT. Yes, my husband's a psychotherapist, so I have been very schooled in DBT and CBT over the years, and it's really a big anchor to coaching, actually. I love that, Zev. Thanks for sharing that one. All right, so know thyself, but also start to think about how you can expand that view continuously. We need to always be working on this stuff. So let's talk about what can we do when we talk about knowing thy team members. So here's a couple of ideas. I think the main overarching thing for me with knowing the team members is this idea of building continuous connection through collaboration. So how can we continually get to know each other and learn better ways to collaborate together? So one of the techniques, and we've started incorporating this into our core signature program, the Roundtable for Leaders, is a personal operating manual. So, it's funny, right? You buy a new refrigerator and you get an operating manual that tells you how to work it. As human beings, it's not like we show up and say, here's my operating manual. This is the stuff that, I love. These are my values. These are my strengths. These are the things that if you do them, it's really going to drive me crazy. This is how I like to receive information. This is how I look when I'm under stress. This is the best way to approach me. We don't do any of that usually. Some of you may be doing that and you're like, okay, Glenn, preaching to the choir. But think about personal operating manual. If you want a copy of ours, just, put a note in the chat and I'll get Leah and Kenzie to, make a note and we can send you a copy of our POM. But it's a great thing to do. Have it, you do it, share it with your team, have your team members do it. People can get creative with it, make a PowerPoint presentation, have some fun with it. But it's really about getting to know each other and understanding what do you need from each other. And that sets the stage for being able to make requests from each other. When we use the IDI assessment, we use it with partners. If people are in a bit of rub or conflict with each other, we can look at their IDI reports and say, oh, you get a lot of energy from this and you don't get as much energy from that. How do we help you bridge that gap? Because probably somewhere in the middle is probably the right place to be in the relationship, but tensions can either push you apart or they can make you stronger. So I think the exercises like sharing that really allow you to understand, right, where each other is coming from. The next thing, I think often we don't think about stakeholders. We don't think about our team as stakeholders. We don't think about other teams as stakeholders, right? So team members can be stakeholders, but also team members in other divisions. So if you have a peer that you have to work with very regularly, how often have you done a stakeholder check-in? How often have you got a stakeholder contract, right? Which is a set of working agreements with how you're going to work together. And, starting that a very easy process, and I use this process all the time, is let's talk about what's working, let's talk about what's not, and let's together come up with a action plan to sort of close those gaps or build on the strengths, right? So think about how you are bridging your knowledge and understanding of other people's needs. Have you had there's always departments that have natural tensions. I worked in sales for years, sales and accounting. Oh my gosh, right? Salespeople wanting to go off the rate card, accounting wanting certain margins. No, you can't discount that, but we wanted to win the business. Like all of those conversations create tensions because between departments, our stakeholders are different. What we're being asked to do is different. So how to kind of make sure that you're building and strengthening that working relationship together. You don't have that as one of kind of the key things you're doing. I'd really encourage you to think about that as a way, again, we're just looking at small ways we can move to being more of a collective view versus our individualistic swimming lane view. So know thy team members. What do you do? Like, do you do anything to really get to know other team members? Anybody who's going to, or any ways that you kind of stay connected? Do you use other techniques than the POM, my little POM technique? Would love to hear that. I know I see people asking for the POM. Be vulnerable to signal a safe space where they can be vulnerable and share what they were thinking and feeling. Absolutely. In the Roundtable, those of you who've been through that program, you know that at our very first session, when we bring a group together, we do a personal pictograph where people get to know each other and talk about each other, not in the roles that they're doing, but who they are as people and what's important to them. Okay, one-to-ones, using first 5 to 10 minutes of one-to-one to talk about non-work things. Love that. Yes. Creating this personal connection. I can remember years ago, I worked for a company and we used to have an annual kickoff session where all of the different business units from across the country in the US used to come together. And one year we were debating at the executive team whether or not we should continue doing it. And a lot of the other businesses, because it was always held in Toronto, complained about the cost to bring everybody in. And so it ended up, they ended up not doing it one year. And I really noticed a shift in how the business units then interacted with each other. You need to connect and get to know each other. And so all those things like company picnics that we used to have and all of those social events that we used to do, they're so easy to chop those out of your day. And when you get very in demand as leaders, it's easy to let go of those social elements. But I think it's so critical that we start to look at, we're social beings. We need to connect. Like loneliness in the pandemic was a real thing, right? And I think, there's ways that as leaders, we need to be intentional about creating those connections. And in hybrid, even more important to be intentional about creating those personal connections where people are more dispersed, right? Oh, I love the international potluck, Jen. I think that's amazing. And I think, a lot of people I'm talking to are like, we can't get people back in the office. Give people a purpose and a reason to come back in the office, right? Don't just make them come back in so that they can sit on a Zoom call. Give them a purpose. And I think this is the higher thing. We just need to know connection's important. There's a why behind it, because that's what starts to fuel this idea of working more better collectively. More better. What was that? Better collectively. Okay. So knowing thy team. So this is, we're seeing coaching. So coaching space, I would say I got into coaching in the early 2000s. That's when I did my first coach training. So it's been 23 years. And it was all the first part I would say it was all about the one-to-one. Individuals in this organizations, we're training individuals to be better coaches. Now it's all about the team. It's all about the team. You're going to see team coaching everywhere. So as a team leader, what's the foundation of team coaching? Well, to Zev's point, you got to create the vulnerability, right? You've got to start to create a space where people can feel safe. So one of the ways that I feel like we need to shift, so we do all these individual assessments. A lot of them have team components. You can have a team disc component. You can have, I think social styles has a team component. Certainly colors does. IDI, the tool that we use a lot with teams, does. Even the 360 has a team component that we can look at. Start to move from the individual to the collective. What are we doing as a team? Let's look at some team assessments where we can get together and focus as a team on how can we get better. One of my simple favorite tools that we use with teams is by Team Coaching International, which has a team measure how are we on a couple of scales, productivity and positivity, and then really set a clear action plan that we're all involved in creating. It's not just on the back of the leader. We as a team are going to build this together. So thinking about how you can increase the team's we Q, right? We all have IQ. What's our we Q? What's our collective understanding of how we're working together? And then curating this culture of feedback within the group. One of the things that we did, and I got this from Pat Lencioni, his 5 dysfunctions of a team. One of the foundations of teams is to really build trust and vulnerability. And so he has an exercise that you do, which does that and also, frankly, curates a culture of feedback within a group. And the exercise is that you have everybody go around a circle and say to each other, this is one thing that I love about working with you. And here's one thing that you could do more of that would really help the team. That exercise, and I will tell you as a team leader, when I hear my team do it with each other, it gives me insights into 2 things. One, it really gives me insights into what that person's strengths are, what the team is valuing about the contribution the person is making. And it also gives me a really good window into where I can support them in a coaching capacity, right? For me as a leader, getting that input is really helpful in order to, kind of continuously recalibrate. This is another spin on the 360, but the idea here is as a team, we're doing this together, right? It's not a one-to-one conversation. This is a group conversation. You can't go from 0 to this, though. You might need to start with your team members one-to-one having the conversation and then bring it forward with, maybe you start with, here's one thing I love about working with you, right? That can be hard for people to just even accept positive, feedback. The more of, which is feed forward, we're not beating you up for stuff you didn't do, the more of, can be the next phase. So think about where your team's at to phase in conversations like this. So that's know thy team. Again, would love, do you know who said what important to this type of activity versus, do you feel knowing who said what is important to this type of activity versus anonymous? Um, Jen, are you talking about like in this one that I'm just talking about here?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I wouldn't make this a non, like, to me, I would start with it not be like, it's a public spoken thing, like, we literally sit in a circle and we do it together, and it goes around, and last year we have some external contractors that come work with us very extensively and come to our offsite. They participated. Um, we just really make it part of a growth, journey for our group. I think the more you can make everybody within your team aware of what everybody else is working on, the strengths that they bring to the team, and make this a collective responsibility for all of us to get better, all of us to support each other, the more, we're removing. I feel like a lot of times leaders walk around like Atlas, right? Where we have to do all of these things and make the calls and be the ones that deliver the feedback. I think, the more we can cultivate these conditions, the better. So that's how I do it. But like I said, start where your team's ready, right? Don't go from 0 to a million. Um, the next things that this is really on an individual level to build better balance. So we talked about this idea that most of us are not able to balance results and people. Okay. So I'm going to share with you 4 key behaviors in the 2 main buckets that you can start to just generally think about doing more of, that will help you. So if you lean towards the people side and you probably need to be a little bit more results focused, these are the things that you want to start thinking about. How are you demonstrating ambition? How are you setting higher aspirations for your team? Um, how are you showing up with purpose to drive hard goals? These are the qualities, the things that you see here. These are the qualities of people who really have this drive for results around a specific behavior that MRG has isolated that they call high production, right? So being able to push for results, that's a big one. And again, if you want more detail on these behaviors, just drop a note. Like if you're like, hey, I'd like to learn more about production behaviors, we can send you a follow-up on that. The second behavior is a behavior that MRG calls control. And it's really about follow-up. It's the art of follow-up. Are you reminding people? You're keeping them on deadline. If you're somebody who's pretty loose and easygoing, you may be giving people a little bit too much runway, right? So think about whether or not, that's something you need to work on. And we can send you a little sheet on how to up your control behavior. On the flip side, if hey, I'm a results driver, man, I'm pushing my team to get big targets, you need to be a little bit more relationship focused. The first one is empathy. Not surprising, high empathy is important. Those are the things like being kind, generous, interest in others. So taking that time at the first 5 minutes to check in with your team to see how they're doing. Great demonstration of empathy, right? So if you want that sheet, let us know. And then the team orientation, this is cooperative behavior. This is where you're seeing like leaders who are doing this well aren't having the pushback around hybrid work because they're doing trade-offs with their teams. How do you want to work? What's going to work for you? How can we make this better? These are my concerns. What are your concerns? Okay, how can we come to a conclusion together? This behavior really drives that relationship focus. But I would say in this moment in time, if those of you who are struggling with hybrid, this cooperation behavior is one that, we probably need to be leaning into a little bit more. So drop what you're interested in and we'll send you sort of the cheat sheets on how to grow that behavior if you're interested in that. And then, you got to build a really intentional plan. Those of you who've been through our programs know what this looks like, but it's really about with behavior, you've got to get specific. So if you want to be a more caring leader, don't say that. What does that mean? This means what was put in the chat earlier. I'm going to spend the first 5 minutes, my one-on-ones, seeing how people are feeling, and I'm going to action that. That's more specific. So when you're trying to move a behavior, specificity becomes critical. Okay. And then the last one I'm going to touch on is community. And if you've been around us for a while, we are all about community and this idea that you just don't go it alone. So there's 3 kind of key drivers around that I think anybody can do. So one is get a peer learning partner, get somebody in your organization. I was with a group of VPs yesterday and they came to this on their own conclusion. They're all working on different leadership behaviors. They've used the 360 as a grounding and across the table on their own said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had a peer learning partner who's going to hold us accountable to this behavior change and the work that we're doing? Yes, indeed. Because as an external coach, I don't see you in action. I don't know what you're actually doing in your day to day, but you know what? Your peers probably will. So start to think about how you can cultivate an ongoing peer learning partnership or mentorship but I think peer to peer, there's just such a great opportunity there. We share so much, right? Somebody you trust that you can talk to and that can also help support and coach you around what you're working on. And again, you're then strengthening connect collective. We're helping each other. The next is we touched on it already, but team coaching, this idea of creating intentional interdependency by increasing the knowledge we have of each other with the team, right? This is the piece that we want to kind of create more intentionality about. And that means things like having team offsites where a big chunk of your offsite is focused on, let's learn about each other as a team. We've got ours coming up in June and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if I should do the Berkman with the team. That could be interesting. I just did it. Maybe we should do this as a team. What is the development you're doing to continuously deepen the learning and insights your team has? Not just your strat plan. Do this. Yes, do that too. But what's the team intention that you're creating? And then start a peer group. I've given you a handbook. I wrote the Grassroots Leadership Revolution. It's basically the Roundtable for Leaders in a book. You can do it yourself. Those of you who've been through the Roundtable program, you know how to do this stuff. There's lots of different options for that, but having a peer group of 4 to 5 peers that you can get together with and talk through issues on, again, the group that I was with yesterday, I love them. That was one of the ideas that they realized that they weren't having the deep conversations that they needed to have. Again, you're strengthening the collective. I feel like the peer relationship is so underestimated, undervalued, often ignored. We're too busy focusing up and down. How can you tap into the peer network? And for those of you who are like, this all sounds great, don't think I want to start my own, you can come into our program. We don't offer it open enrollment very often. We do it twice a year. We got one coming up in the fall. So if you're interested in that and you're like, I'd love to kind of understand more about this, you can reach out to Ashley. She can send more information on it and what the criteria are for being able to join. You'll be with 7 other leaders from 7 different organizations. If you're with an organization, you're like, I'm kind of interested in this, I'd like to bring it in-house. That's where we do most of our work. And any one of us are happy to chat with you about how that would work. But think about this notion of building your community. This is like your personal board of directors, and be really clear on, you know, especially if you're setting one up on your own, what's the purpose? What am I trying to achieve? And bring the group together that want to be part of that group. So here's what I'm going to say to you. We have a choice as leaders. We can continue to be the heroic leader, try and do it all on our own. I will tell you that the next generation of leaders that are coming in are not like that. They are far more on the collective. So if you're trying to manage those people, if you're frustrated with your Gen Z employees, let me tell you, it's because they're more wired to the collective, and it's really uncomfortable for Xers and boomers and late stage people to deal with. We are going to have, I really believe we are going to have to start to shift how we think about leadership, and we have to uncouple being a leader, that's a role, and you have a role to play, from leadership, which is a collective responsibility. It means that we all bring our talents, we all bring our skills, we look to support each other. If I'm not highly results focused, it's good on my team to be listening to the person that is. Same on the people side. If I don't really have that natural DNA around people and all that kind of thing, who on my team does? And I need to listen to them, right? Regardless of the position I'm in. And how can we make sure those voices are heard and that we're collectively understanding where our opportunities lie? So I hope I have convinced you, I shouldn't say hope, I believe I have convinced you to join us on this tour towards more collective leadership. Don't go it alone. It doesn't have to be lonely at the top. There are great avenues to support you in getting where you need to go. We'll make sure that you get all of the support tools that we've talked about today. And as always, I'm always happy, or Leah or Ashley or Colleen and myself are always happy to chat with you about where you're at on your journey and how we can support you to get there. So thank you all for being here today. And as a reminder, this is how you can get, I should say, Deb's coming up in June. I forgot about Deb. She's coming up in June to talk about collaboration. She wrote a great book called Collaborate. So if you're like me and go, oh, those team projects I had in school, I hated them. Collaboration is going to be the name of the game in collective leadership. So join us for that. Should be a really entertaining conversation. And you can keep in touch with us on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn if you're not already connected. Thanks, everybody. And thanks for sharing all those tools. We'll pull them together and I'll do a bit of an update next week. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.